The Minister should have answered clearly that she did know on the programme yesterday.
I think it would have been wiser for her to have come out and said it in a straightforward way, but the real responsibility for this, as I've said in other interviews, lies with the people who decided to cover the matter up in the first place when it happened in June. And presumably it was Downing Street. Now, I have to say, and I never thought I'd use these terms, in fairness to the spin doctors of Downing Street, a very senior former Cameron spin doctor has rung up my office in a state of great anger, saying they never knew anything about it.
No, they've denied it. We've got the quotes here saying it's entirely false of you to suggest that David Cameron's media team covered up or tried to cover up the Trident missile test.
So then that just moves the argument one step further back. And I have to say it was a great pleasure to convey the message to Sir Craig Oliver that he ought to issue a press release on the subject. And I hope he'll do so in great detail and depth. But nevertheless, if he didn't know, did the Prime Minister know? And if the Prime Minister knew, why didn't he make the matter public? And why didn't he even tell his own closest spin doctor?
Right, so you're saying that David Cameron may have known and refused to actually tell people. It does seem inconceivable he wouldn't have told his Director of Communications at the time.
The plot seems to thicken and get more and more mysterious. But the fact remains that if there was a cover-up, this cover-up occurred at the time of the abortive missile test, which was in June and not in July when the vote was being held and when we had a new Prime Minister who'd been in office just for a few days.
Right, but even so, even if she had only been in the office for a few days as Prime Minister, I mean, these are key pieces of information. She would have known, we now know, in fact, she was briefed about it. I mean, it would be inconceivable that she wouldn't have been. So, again, doesn't it betray a level of trust that she wasn't able to be clear about that when asked a direct question?
I think it would have been more sensible for both Prime Ministers to have been absolutely upfront about this. But what you have to remember is that this particular issue was not what the debate was all about. The debate was all about, do we renew our nuclear deterrent or not?
But we didn't have all the facts, did we?
Well,
and MPs didn't have all the facts.
Well, we do have all the facts in the sense that this particular missile system, including the missiles that we use, are shared with the Americans, and altogether, according to reports, there have been over 160 successful test firings. Now, are you seriously suggesting that a majority of 355 MPs would have been turned around into a vote not to renew the Trident missile system?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all, clearly, because I haven't put that to you. What I am suggesting to you is that there is a level of transparency that MPs would probably have appreciated, and if that was the case, and you're so convinced they wouldn't have been converted in terms of their viewpoint, then why not just set it out?
I've already
clearly?
answered that. I've already said that it should have been done, but I can only assume that she may have thought that there would have been an inevitable row on the basis of her having to point the finger at the previous administration, because the first question that would have then been asked was, well, why was it covered up a month ago by your predecessor?
Was it right then for the Business Secretary, Greg Clark, who has said today that it was wrong or would have been wrong to comment on Trident tests as it would put information in the hands of our enemies? But was it then wrong for the government to publicise the successful testing of Trident missiles in October 2012?
Well, that last point is the crucial point, Jo, and you're absolutely right. The fact is that most information, just like with special forces, most information about our nuclear submarines and the nuclear deterrent has to be kept under wrap. But the fact is that when you have a missile test firing of this sort, it's usually widely publicised, and the sensible thing when there's an occasional mishap and a planned aborting of a mission when something goes wrong is to be upfront about it, and then you wouldn't have had any issue arising out of it of significance whatsoever.
Right. I mean, you are against the renewal of the Trident missile system anyway, so it wouldn't have changed your mind either way. It wouldn't have made any material difference.
Look, I think this is deeply worrying. There was a serious malfunction in our nuclear deterrence. The Prime Minister came and told our MPs to renew this, spending £40 billion worth of taxpayers' money, and when we raised concerns about how credible this was, we were dismissed. It wasn't just me, there were members from both sides of the House who raised concerns about how credible is it, should we be looking at other options, is it right for the time? We were dismissed out of hand, we were criticised, and we we were told constantly that we didn't care about the country's security. If the Prime Minister knew, which, judging by the interview that you just showed us, I'm a politician too, I know when someone's evading a question, she knew she should have told us, she shouldn't have covered it up, she shouldn't have kept us in the dark, there should be an inquiry into this.
Julip's right.
No, I think the key point is this ballistic missile system is by far the most effective and efficient in the world.
But my question was, should Theresa May have been straight in terms of what she knew?
Well, I think in relation, as Dr. Lewis said, in relation to the debate in July, the two are not related. The question was, do we move forward? In this particular instance...
But what about her interview yesterday? Should she have been straight about what she was briefed?
I hope very much that she was well briefed. It's entirely her decision whether to discuss or not. For me, the point that we should take away is that the Royal Navy have tested a missile every 4 years. This HMS Vengeance has just come out of refit. They were making sure everything worked. They tested it. There was a problem with the missile, which was not armed. It could not cause any great damage. It was a test.
Thank goodness.
And the Royal Navy and our submariners did a cracking job doing all the right things to ensure that they managed the situation.
But this is about being straight
really
with the
important.
British electorate and being straight with MPs in the House of Commons when an issue like this is being voted on, whether or not it was directly related or not. I mean, the UK notifies other states when these tests are being carried out. So actually, Lord Admiral West said that the Russians would know more about the test and the misfiring of a missile that veered off course than your colleagues in the House of Commons. Can that be right?
Well, personally, I don't see a problem with whether it was to be, discussed and put down as a written statement in the way that lots of things are. But to be honest, we test lots of weaponry across the board with all three services all the time. And this was not a nuclear test. This was an unarmed missile test. Therefore, in of itself...
But they announced it in 2012. But they announced it in 2012.
Well,
I mean, it looks by sort of stint of omission, if you like.
I completely understand the point, but I genuinely think this is an issue that is out of proportion. I think the challenge is whether the new Prime Minister was fully made aware. The statement you read out implies that she was briefed on a planned test, but that was a historic test at that point. So I would question whether she was fully briefed. But I think the point is I have no problem with us knowing that our Royal Navy are doing a fantastic job using an incredibly effective tool to keep us safe.
Lord West, whom I've just mentioned, former First Sea Lord and Security Minister, has likened this incident to North Korea and the Soviet Union covering up missile tests that went wrong. What's your reaction to that?
I think we sometimes see when they go wrong too. So, I think the world's media pay close attention. This has been highlighted because people have drawn together a series of information.
But after the event happened, I mean, when that debate was going on, was it right that this was not made clear?
I think she made clear that her projection to us, and which the majority of us supported, was that this is the most sophisticated, efficient and reliable ballistic missile system that exists, and that's the one that we want to invest in.
We've talked about the fact that Theresa May should or shouldn't have been clearer at the time, but in terms of the effectiveness of the system, listening to both Julian Lewis and to Anne-Marie Trevelyan, are you in any doubt that it's a sort of non-effective or ineffective system? Even though you don't support it, is there any doubt in your mind that it is not effective?
For me, the main concern is there was a serious malfunction. We needed to know about it in Parliament. You cannot tell MPs to make a decision on such a serious topic without giving us the full facts. The Prime Minister covered it up. The former Prime Minister covered it up. We need to have an inquiry.
That's a problem, isn't it, for the government? Because it does, in the end, allow MPs, quite rightly, like Julip and her colleagues who are against the renewal of that Trident system, to doubt the honesty and integrity of the government.
Yes, I mean, we must disentangle the strategic and the political issue. The strategic issue is that if these submarines went to sea with only one missile, then a failure of one missile out of 162 would be a serious problem. In strategic terms, this means very little, if anything. But in terms of political straightforwardness, then it does raise an issue. And depending on what's said in the House of Commons this afternoon, maybe the Defence Committee as soon as tomorrow might be able to call some people before it. But we'll have to wait and see whether the government finally comes clean on this unnecessary row.
Right. Well, an urgent question has been asked for and has now been confirmed. I don't yet know who'll be coming back to the House to actually answer that question, but it's going to happen at 3:30 this afternoon, which is unsurprising. Will that satisfy you, Tulip
Well,
Siddiq?
I guess I have to listen and see.
Right. I mean, if ministers are coming back, what do you think they need to say, Julian? What would you like to hear to put this to rest?
I would like to hear a straightforward timeline of when this matter was reported to the previous Prime Minister, what was decided then about covering it up, and when the present Prime Minister learned about it and for what reason she decided not to mention it in the immediate run-up to the debate. But as I say, I don't think it would have made a scrap of difference to the outcome of the debate, with its stunningly large majority quite rightly in favour of keeping our nuclear weapons as long as other countries can threaten us with theirs.
Julian Lewis, thank you for coming in.